So Ohio State's halfway through spring practice, and if you ask him about a specific position, it doesn't sound like he's all the way encouraged by what he's seen so far. I'm Stephen Means, that's Andrew Gillis, that's Stefan Krajisnik. Stefan, you asked him about the defensive tackle depth because that's been an ongoing conversation about, okay, Edric Houston, gonna be a star. Caden McDonald, wow. Then what? How did he feel as they've gone through their first scrimmage now this spring, the first of 3, and 8 practices in? What did Ryan Day have to say about where the depth is at the defensive tackle?
Yeah, and this all started, a few weeks ago when spring practice first started. Ryan Day's first presser of the spring was basically, he was asked, which position groups do you feel like might be an area you target in the spring portal window, right, when spring practice finishes here. And he mentioned defensive line and defensive tackle specifically in that group. So I wanted to know, 2 weeks later, has someone, like a Jason Moore, Will Smith Jr., Taiwan Malo, has someone kind of stepped up in that room to make you say, okay, maybe we got more depth than we thought, right? We kind of said that last year, like when we saw Jalen McClain at safety, we were like, okay, maybe there's more depth in the safety room than we originally thought, behind Lathan and Caleb. But it sounds like at defensive tackle he's still looking for more, which is, I don't know if, I guess concerning is the word, because you kind of are just where you were a couple weeks ago. So it's not like, the alarms are going off and they've taken a major step back, but it's concerning in the sense of like, has no one really taken that step? And maybe it's hard to do in these spring practices the way they're formatted, but even then, has no one really taken a step to where you feel like you have some more depth? And the reason I guess I circle that as something to be scared of a bit is, even if you do add bodies in the spring portal window, what does that look like? Like traditionally, the winter window is when you see the best players enter the portal, right? Like they're not going to get a Caleb Downs of the defensive line in this spring portal window. And if you do, that's a really quick turnaround in August to get this guy ready to play. So it's going to be interesting. It's definitely an area where I feel like they're probably going to go get at least one body to bring in. What does that look like? We'll see. But you circle it right now and you say, what does this defense look like if that's the depth that you have at defensive tackle? And I'm sure you want to talk about that a little bit.
To be fair, they did out an offensive tackle in the spring portal window, and he's probably going to be a first-round draft pick. So it's not impossible. It's just less likely. Andrew,
that took time, too, before he's turned into a first-round pick.
No, it took an entire year. That's a good point. I wanted to compare it to how we talked about some other position groups today, right? Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford seem to be taking that step. They're in the exact same position as defensive tackle depth is in, where it's like, all right, we think we got guys, but they're not necessarily where they need to be yet. It does sound like it's coming along there at safety. The way he talked about the running back depth, the way he talked about edge, where it's, I like the guys we have, C.J. Hicks, Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, even Logan George, the transfer from Idaho State, or Idaho, I can't remember which one it is. Idaho State, cool.
It's from Idaho.
But he also, yeah, that's true. But also he said, maybe we'll explore if we think if we don't have enough. But that's different. That's topping off a room versus with the defensive tackle depth where they have names, but maybe it should be more of a concern.
Yeah, I think size is probably the biggest concern. I think, going to get a bigger body is, maybe something that they should explore in the portal window. And I'm talking, maybe somebody that can play, maybe like a 2-gap nose type of situation, maybe basically your backup Caden McDonald. But as we've talked about this, and as Ryan Day talked today, I started to think, what if they solve the issue without addressing the issue? And what I mean by that is, what if you just make C.J. Hicks your defensive end / hybrid type player, and instead of saying, hey, we need to go get a player in the portal because, and we're going to pull somebody up from the G5 just as depth, or we're going to pull somebody from, whatever school just as depth. Like, what if they go get a linebacker out of the portal and they're looking at Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Peyton Pierce, maybe you have C.J. Hicks as kind of this hybrid, and maybe you just say, you know what, we're going to have 3 down fronts a heck of a lot. We're going to run varied fronts a lot of the time with Caden McDonald maybe as like a true nose. C.J. Hicks and Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry can kind of mix that at defensive end. I'm starting to think like maybe you just say, if the answers aren't there at defensive tackle, maybe that can change how you look at the rest of this defense. This is a long ago example, but, like 10 years ago, the Detroit Tigers basically went, we don't have a good bullpen. So what did they do? They got Verlander, Scherzer, and Price in their starting rotation because they went, you know what, we're not going to fix the bullpen. We're just going to try and get this starting rotation solidified. So I'm wondering if Ohio State goes, you know what, our linebackers might lead this team. Our linebackers might lead this defense. What if we just strengthen that because we don't like the answers at defensive tackle? I think that is an interesting maybe dynamic to this as well, because we're talking about Ohio State in the same realm that we did with Jim Knowles, but I'm starting to wonder, okay, what if the front the last couple of years that we have seen isn't the front that we're going to see in 2025? And how does that maybe impact the defensive tackle depth and maybe what you would want to go get at the end of this portal window?
Yeah, but that still doesn't fix the problem. Defensive tackles are how you stop the run. You have to start with there. And so all you're essentially saying, take one of the defensive tackles off the field, now you're rotating two guys. Oh, even Georgia, at their heyday, they had like 4 or 5 defensive tackles. Those guys were only playing 15 to 20 snaps a game. So the idea of itself, yes, get better at places you're already good and strengthen your strength. I'm all for that. That's rotating from a place of strength. But you still need guys to step up. You still need guys who can play football for you in the fall. And right now it sounds like, regardless of the description, whether you're talking nose, 3-tech, whatever it is, because Larry Johnson cross-trains all of those guys, you've got a top 2. And then a significant gap when you're talking about where Tywan Malone is as he enters year 5 of college football, and he's only been focused on football now. He's not playing baseball anymore because he's been here for 3 years. Jason Moore, former top 100 recruit, former top 80 recruit who looks the part. He looks like by now he should be showing up for you. I didn't hear promise from Ryan Day with the defensive tackle position. Will Smith, maybe that's another guy who could come along in year 3 as well. I didn't hear promise. I heard promise at defensive end. He threw Zion Grady's name out there as a guy who might need to step up, which is great. Top 60 recruit from Alabama. He probably should be in the conversation right now. I heard promise at safety. The only other position group I didn't hear promise were tackle, and that's because you just got those guys as transfers, so they're still learning their way a little bit, and wide receiver, and that's because who cares? With all due respect, listen, your top 4 are pretty solidified with Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, and then Bryson Rogers, and then maybe Mylan Graham. You throw him in there as well. That's more talking about the true freshmen who are maybe still coming along here. I didn't hear promise at defensive tackle. And 8 practices in the spring practice, I'm not saying it needs to be a finished product, but you need to start hearing promise. And he gave essentially the same answer about defensive tackle that he gave 8 practices ago, and that's not a good thing for Ohio State is. And that spring portal opens up not too long after this, about a couple of weeks here. And so let's see how Ohio State continues to explore that. Get to text 614-350-3315. As things happen, that's the first place we'll go. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. And we'll continue to discuss this on Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. Steven, Stefan, Andrew, we've got depth. A lot of promise, too. See ya.